The Los Angeles Sun, usually a welcome guest, felt like an intruder in Dr. Megan Miller's pristine, minimalist condo. It highlighted the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny reminder of the life that wasn't. A pediatrician by trade, Meg adored children. Their laughter her favorite symphony, their tiny hands her most cherished touch. Yet, after 10 long years married to Detective Mark Sullivan, her own arms remained achingly empty. Barren, the doctors had called it, a word that echoed in the hollow chambers of her heart. Mark, a man consumed by the city's underbelly, its shadows and sirens, rarely spoke of children. His work was his mistress, demanding, unforgiving, and always present. Meg sighed, pushing away from her laptop, the day's patient files a blur. Another shift at City Kids Pediatrics done. Each child she treated was a joy, a testament to her calling. But the joy was always tinged with a familiar, dull ache. Their own child would never be. She absently stroked her flat stomach, a phantom gesture from a time when hope still flickered. Mark's reaction to the diagnosis years ago had been a curt nod, as if discussing a case file, not the death of a shared dream. He'd carried on, work his constant companion, while she learned to navigate the grief that ambushed her in quiet moments. The shrill ring of her cell shattered the silence. Vicky. "Hey girl, what's up?" Meg answered, forcing a brightness into her voice she didn't feel. "Meg, honey, can you do me a huge favor?" Vicky's voice, usually bubbly, held a thread of concern. Vicky managed Open Arms, a local children's shelter. "We've got a little guy here, Leo. He's running a fever and I'm worried. Our regular doc is out. Could you swing by, please?" "Of course, Vic. On my way." No questions asked. If Vicky needed her, it was serious. Meg grabbed her coat, the city lights beckoning her back into the cool evening. Her car, a sensible sedan, smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. She navigated the familiar LA traffic, a soft jazz tune doing little to soothe the disquiet in her soul. Tonight, something felt different, a subtle shift in the air, though she couldn't name it. Little did she know her life was about to be turned upside down by a small boy with big, sad eyes. The Open Arms shelter was a beacon of cheerful chaos in a tough neighborhood. Kids' artwork adorned the walls, and the scent of cookies, Vicky's famous chocolate chip, usually battled with the smell of industrial cleaner. Tonight, an undercurrent of worry muted the usual cheer. Vicky, tall and capable with her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, met her at the door, her smile strained. "Thanks for coming, Meg. You're a lifesaver." "Anytime." "What's the story with Leo?" Meg asked, already slipping into professional mode. "He's 6, just arrived a few days ago, no medical history on file, woke up burning, sore throat, really weak." Vicky led her down a hallway, past a playroom where a few children watched a cartoon, their faces illuminated by the flickering screen. One tiny girl, no older than 5, tugged on Vicky's jeans. "Vicky, story time?" "Soon, sweetie," Vicky promised, ruffling her hair. "Dr. Miller needs to see Leo first." They reached a small, quiet room. A little boy lay in bed, his face pale against the bright blue pillowcase, a flush high on his cheeks. His large blue eyes, startling in his small face, watched them with a wariness that tugged at Meg's heart. This was Leo. And somehow, Meg knew, this little boy was about to change everything. Meg offered a gentle smile, pulling a small stool closer to the bed. "Hi, Leo. I'm Dr. Meg. Mind if I take a look?" The boy just stared, his small hands clutching the edge of his blanket, knuckles white. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The tension in his small frame was palpable, a silent scream of fear. "Does your throat hurt, sweetie?" Meg asked softly, her voice a soothing balm she'd perfected over years of dealing with scared children. Another nod. He flinched when she reached for her otoscope. "It's okay, buddy. Just a little light, see?" She clicked it on, demonstrating on her own hand. "Let's peek at that throat." Slowly, cautiously, he opened his mouth. Meg frowned. "Yep, it's pretty red and angry in there. You're being so brave." She reached for her stethoscope. "Now, let's listen to your amazing lungs. Deep breath for me." Leo tensed as the cool metal touched his chest but complied, his eyes never leaving hers. After the examination, Meg turned to Vicky. Viral. Classic strep, I think. We need to get his fever down. Push fluids. I'll write a script for an antibiotic and something for the fever. If he's not better by tomorrow, or if he gets worse, he needs to go to the ER. Thank you, Meg, Vicky breathed, relief washing over her face. I was so worried. He'll be okay. He's a tough little guy, Meg said, then looked back at Leo, offering another reassuring smile. Right, Leo? He blinked, a silent acknowledgement. He's not much of a talker, Vicky explained quietly as they stepped into the hallway. He's been through a lot, more than any kid should. That familiar pang. Every child at Open Arms had a story, usually a heartbreaking one. Meg wanted to ask, to understand the shadows in Leo's eyes, but she held back. It wasn't her place. Have you tried just sitting with him? Hours. Vicky sighed. He just watches, or gives one-word answers. He needs time, I guess, and someone he can trust. Meg looked back at the small figure in the bed. Something about Leo, those haunted blue eyes, resonated deep within her, a chord of empathy vibrating with an unexpected intensity. He needs to be safe. He needs to be loved. The thought was so strong, so sudden, it startled her. The drive home was a blur of city lights, and Leo's face superimposed on her windshield. Why this child? Why this overwhelming feeling? By the time she parked in her condo's underground garage, his quiet, "Thank you for helping me," whispered as she was leaving, and his shy, fleeting smile were seared into her memory. "You're very kind," he'd added, his voice barely audible. The condo was silent, Mark still not home. No surprise there, but the familiar sting of disappointment was sharper tonight. She made herself a cup of tea, the silence amplifying the echo of Leo's soft words. She tried to read, but the boy's face swam before her eyes. At 7:30 p.m., she called Mark. "Hey, honey, you on your way?" she asked, trying to keep the edge from her voice. "Hour or so. Big case," he grunted. Then the line went dead. He'd hung up. Meg stared at the phone, then at the table she'd half-heartedly set for two. Salad, a casserole warming in the oven. It wasn't the late nights or the demanding job. It was the disconnect, the chasm that had grown between them. She put the food away. An hour turned into 2, then 3. At 10:45 p.m., his phone went straight to voicemail. Offline again. This too was familiar, but tonight it felt like a deliberate wall, shutting her out completely. The unshed tears burned. She blew out the candle she'd lit, the scent of vanilla and unfulfilled hope lingering in the air. She didn't hear Mark stumble in at 3 a.m., didn't feel him collapse onto the bed beside her, fully clothed. Meg woke before dawn, the city still cloaked in a pre-sunrise gloom. The weight of Leo's gaze, his vulnerability, had settled in her heart. He felt familiar, like a missing piece she hadn't known she was searching for. She slipped out of bed, pulling on a robe, Mark a dead weight beside her, reeking faintly of stale coffee and something metallic she couldn't place. Gun oil? She tiptoed to the kitchen, the need to create, to nurture, suddenly overwhelming. Today, she wouldn't just make coffee. She'd make a real breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice. A peace offering? Or perhaps a desperate attempt to bridge the ever-widening gap between her and Mark, to prepare the ground for a conversation she knew would be difficult. The aroma of maple syrup and frying bacon eventually lured Mark from the bedroom. He emerged, rumpled and bleary-eyed, dark circles stark against his pale skin. But a ghost of a smile touched his lips when he saw the spread. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, nuzzling her neck. "Morning," he mumbled into her hair. "Morning," she replied softly, gently extricating herself to pour him coffee. They ate in a strained silence for a few minutes, the clinking of cutlery loud in the stillness. Meg twisted her napkin in her lap. "Mark," she began, her voice carefully neutral. "I was at Open Arms last night." He nodded, taking a large gulp of coffee. "Vicky's shelter? Everything okay?" "A little boy, Leo. He's wonderful, Mark." She paused, watching his face for any flicker of interest. "He has strep, but he's going to be fine." "Good," Mark said, reaching for the syrup. He clearly wasn't grasping the undercurrent in her tone. Meg took a deep breath, plunging ahead. "Mark, I I can't stop thinking about him. She looked down at her plate, then forced herself to meet his gaze. What if we adopted him? Mark's hand froze, pancake-laden fork halfway to his mouth. He set it down with a clatter. His eyes, moments before softened by sleep and food, sharpened, turning to flint. Adopt him? Meg, are you serious? The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a guarded, almost incredulous look. A stranger's kid? Why on earth would we do that? The casual cruelty of his words hit her like a physical blow. You know I can't have children, Mark, she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to keep it steady. But I need this. I need to care for someone, to love them, to give them a home. He's special, Mark. There's something about him. Mark scraped his chair back, standing abruptly. The sudden movement made her flinch. Listen, Meg, you're just emotional. It's the job, these kids. It'll pass. We're swamped with work, both of us. Bringing a kid into this? It's irresponsible. No. His tone was final, brooking no argument. And no more buts. I'm late. He grabbed his jacket, pecked her distractedly on the cheek, a hollow gesture, and was gone. The door slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the sudden, crushing silence. Meg sat alone at the table, her hand clenched so tightly around her coffee mug that her knuckles were white. The pancakes lay untouched, growing cold, just like the hope in her heart. The confrontation with Mark left Meg feeling hollowed out, adrift in a sea of unspoken grief. Work was a welcome distraction, but every child's giggle, every parent's loving glance, was a fresh stab to her already wounded heart. Leo's face, his wide, questioning eyes, haunted her waking moments. She imagined him calling her mom, a fantasy so potent it brought tears to her eyes. But Mark's no had been a brick wall, unyielding and absolute. The day crawled by. Patients came and went, a parade of sniffles, fevers, and scraped knees. Meg went through the motions, her mind miles away, back in that small room at Open Arms with Leo. She remembered his small, trusting hand in hers, the brief, grateful smile. Dr. Miller, your next patient is here, her nurse Linda chirped, poking her head in. Thanks, Linda. Send them in, Meg replied, forcing a professional smile. As the day wound down, her phone buzzed. Vicky. Meg, how are you holding up, hun? Hey, Vic. Surviving, I guess? Meg sighed. Barely. I figured. Listen, I'm just finishing up. Want to grab coffee? My treat. Usual spot? Sounds like a plan. See you in 30. Closing up the clinic, Meg walked to the small cafe around the corner, her mind a whirlwind of doubt. Was she crazy to even consider adoption against Mark's explicit wishes? How could she ever make him understand the profound emptiness Leo seemed to fill? Vicky was already there, a steaming latte in front of her, another waiting for Meg. Rough day? Vicky asked, her eyes full of concern. You have no idea, Meg said, sinking into the chair. It's not just work, it's everything. Leo? Vicky guessed, her voice soft. He's all I can think about. I don't know what's happening to me, Vic, but I feel like he's supposed to be with me, like he's mine. Vicky smiled gently. It's not surprising, Meg. You've always had a huge heart, especially for kids who need it most. And this little guy, he's clearly gotten under your skin. I talked to Mark, Meg confessed, staring into her latte. He shot it down, said it was just an emotional phase that it would pass. And you? Do you think it will pass? Vicky asked, a knowing glint in her eye. No, Meg whispered, looking out at the bustling LA street. And that scares me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the aroma of coffee a small comfort. Hey, Vicky said, breaking the quiet. What if you brought Leo home, just for a day? No strings, no pressure. Let Mark meet him. See what a great kid he is. Sometimes seeing is believing. Meg's breath hitched. You think Mark would even consider it? He's a tough nut to crack, Vicky admitted. But I don't think even Mark Sullivan could say a flat no to spending a few hours with a kid as sweet as Leo, especially if he sees how much it means to you. It's a gamble, Meg, but maybe, just maybe, it's worth a shot. A tiny spark of hope ignited in Meg's chest. A day. Just one day. Maybe if Mark could see Leo, really see him, he'd understand. Maybe this was their chance, their only chance, to show Mark that a child wasn't a burden, but a blessing. The risk was enormous, but the potential reward? A family. The next few days were a torment of indecision for Meg. Vicky's suggestion to bring Leo home for a day replayed in her mind, a seductive whisper of possibility. The fear of Mark's reaction warred with the undeniable pull she felt towards the little boy. Finally, on her day off, she made her decision. Nerves fluttered in her stomach as she tidied the condo, baking Leo's favorite cookies, chocolate chip, just like Vicky's, and rehearsing 1,000 different ways to introduce the idea to Mark, should he even be home. When Meg arrived at Open Arms, Vicky greeted her with a supportive smile, though a hint of apprehension lingered in her eyes. "You sure about this, Meg?" she asked quietly as they stood by the entrance. "No," Meg admitted with a shaky laugh, "but I have to try. For Leo. For us. He's going to love spending the day with you," Vicky said, then gestured towards the playroom. Leo sat alone in a corner, listlessly turning the pages of a picture book. His face lit up, just a fraction, when he saw Meg. "Hey, Leo," Meg said softly, crouching down to his level. "Remember me? Dr. Meg?" He nodded, a shy smile gracing his lips. "I was wondering, would you like to come to my house for the day? I made those cookies you like, the ones with extra chocolate chips." Leo's blue eyes widened, a spark of genuine delight chasing away some of the shadows. He glanced at Vicky, a silent question. "It's okay, Leo," Vicky assured him with a warm smile. "You can go with Dr. Meg. Have fun?" "Okay," Leo whispered, and then to Meg's utter astonishment, he reached out and tentatively slipped his small hand into hers. Her heart clenched. The simple gesture, so full of nascent trust, felt monumental. The drive to the condo was mostly quiet. Leo sat in the back, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape, occasionally stealing glances at Meg. "When we get there," Meg said, trying to fill the silence, "I can show you my little balcony garden. I have some really pretty flowers. I love taking care of them." "Okay," he replied, his voice a little stronger this time. At the condo, Leo looked around with wide, curious eyes, as if afraid to touch anything in the unfamiliar adult space. "Make yourself at home, Leo," Meg said gently. "Want the grand tour?" They explored the few rooms, ending up on the small balcony overlooking a surprisingly green courtyard. Leo seemed fascinated by the bright petunias and fragrant basil. He reached out a finger and lightly touched a velvety rose petal. "They're soft," he murmured, a hint of wonder in his voice. "They are," Meg agreed. "Flowers are delicate, Leo. They need a lot of care, just like people." He seemed to ponder her words, then asked unexpectedly, "Do you and your husband live here all by yourselves?" "Yes, we do," Meg answered, a pang of sadness catching her off guard. Sometimes it gets a little lonely." Leo looked at her, his gaze surprisingly perceptive for a 6-year-old, but said nothing more. The afternoon passed in a comfortable rhythm of cookies, cartoons, and quiet conversation. Leo slowly began to open up, sharing small details about his favorite superhero and his fear of thunderstorms. Meg felt a warmth spread through her she hadn't experienced in years. This felt right. This felt like family. Evening descended, casting long shadows across the condo. Meg was just helping Leo set out plates for dinner when she heard Mark's key in the lock. Her heart leaped into her throat. Showtime. Mark walked in, briefcase in hand, and stopped dead when he saw the small pair of sneakers by the door. His brow furrowed. He entered the living area, his gaze sweeping the room, and froze when he saw Leo sitting at the dining table, carefully arranging napkins. "What?" Mark began, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. "Is going on here?" Meg stood up, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "Mark, this is Leo. I brought him home from the shelter for the day, just for a visit so he wouldn't feel so alone." Mark's steely gaze shifted from Meg to Leo. The boy looked up, his eyes wide and apprehensive, but he held Mark's stare. "Hello," Mark finally managed, his tone clipped. "Hi," Leo whispered, shrinking back a little. Mark turned back to Meg, his expression unreadable but radiating disapproval. "Are you serious, Meg? We didn't agree to this. You know how I feel?" "I just wanted to give him a good day, Mark," she pleaded softly. "He's a wonderful boy. Maybe if you just got to know him a little?" Mark sighed heavily, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. He dropped his briefcase by the sofa and sat down at the table, pointedly avoiding looking at either of them. Dinner was a tense, almost silent affair. Mark ate mechanically, occasionally shooting guarded glances at Leo, who picked at his food, his earlier spark of animation extinguished. He was trying to be invisible, but Meg saw the anxiety in his eyes, the way he flinched slightly whenever Mark moved too suddenly. It broke her heart. When the strained meal ended, Mark pushed his plate away. "I'm beat. Going to bed." He stood up and walked towards the bedroom without a backward glance at Meg or Leo. The door closed behind him with a soft but decisive click. Meg sat at the table, the weight of Mark's disapproval pressing down on her. She turned to Leo, forcing a smile. "Did you like the spaghetti, sweetie?" Leo nodded. "Yes, thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She ruffled his hair. "Come on, champ. Let me show you where you'll sleep tonight. I made up the guest room for you." Tucked into bed, Leo looked up at Meg, his eyes troubled. "Can I ask you something? Anything, Leo?" "Mr. Sullivan, he doesn't like me, does he?" The innocent question, so direct, so painful, struck Meg to the core. She sat on the edge of his bed, taking his small hand in hers. "Oh, honey, no, it's not that. He's not used to having kids around. He needs some time to adjust." "What if he never adjusts?" Leo asked, his voice small and laced with a knowledge of rejection far beyond his years. Meg didn't know what to say. She squeezed his hand, offering a smile she didn't feel. "Sleep now, Leo. Everything will be okay." But as she walked out of the room, switching off the light, she knew she was lying. She wasn't sure anything would ever be okay again. The chasm between her and Mark felt wider and deeper than ever. A palpable chill hung in the air the next morning, a fog of unspoken tension that even the bright California sun couldn't dispel. Meg sat at the kitchen table, nursing a coffee, her stomach in knots. Leo, subdued and quiet, poked at his cereal. Mark entered the kitchen, and the already strained atmosphere became instantly arctic. His eyes, bloodshot and shadowed, swept the room, deliberately avoiding Leo. He wasn't just tired, he was radiating a cold fury. "Morning," Meg offered, her voice tight, trying to inject a sliver of normalcy into the charged silence. "Sleep okay?" Mark didn't answer. He stared at his empty mug on the counter, but made no move to fill it. This was unlike him. His morning coffee ritual was sacred. It was Leo who, with the innocent bravery of a child, broke the silence. "Mr. Sullivan," he began, his small voice surprisingly clear, not looking up from his cereal bowl. "Meg said you're a policeman." Mark's head snapped up, his gaze, sharp and irritated, finally landing on the boy. He let out a sigh that sounded more like a growl. "Yeah," he bit out. Undeterred, or perhaps not sensing the escalating hostility, Leo pressed on. "Wow. Do you tell cool stories? Like about car chases or rescuing people?" Mark shrugged, his eyes fixed on some distant point over Leo's head. "Nothing to tell, kid. I catch bad guys. It's a job. Ask Meg if you want to talk about something interesting." His tone was dismissive, almost contemptuous. Meg felt a wall of ice slam down between them. "Mark, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You're different today." Again, no direct answer. He moved to the coffee machine, his movements jerky, almost aggressive as he finally poured himself a cup. Leo, bless his persistent heart, tried once more. Is it scary? Working with criminals?" Mark let out a short, humorless laugh. He sat down heavily opposite Meg, staring into his cup. "You don't know what scary is, kid," he said, his voice low and gravelly, still not looking at Leo. The air in the kitchen crackled with unspoken resentment. It was more than just tension. It was something dark, something hidden, seeping out through Mark's every word and gesture. Leo, finally sensing the true depth of the hostility, pushed his chair back and quietly excused himself, retreating to the guest room. The silence he left behind was deafening. Mark finally looked at Meg, his face a stony mask. "Meg," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth, "I don't want you bringing that boy back to this apartment. Ever." "What are you talking about?" she whispered, a knot of dread tightening in her chest. This house, these conversations, this boy, you and me, it's too much pressure, Meg. Too damn much. His gaze skittered away, refusing to meet hers. Meg felt the blood drain from her face. His words weren't just about Leo, they were about them. Mark, I thought if you met Leo, you'd at least try to connect with him. Her voice broke. He stood up, walking towards the front door, not looking back. I can't, Meg. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. I won't even try. I'm sorry. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Meg standing alone in the kitchen, the bitter taste of his rejection, of her rejection, burning her throat. The carefully constructed facade of their marriage had just shattered into a million pieces. The drive back to Open Arms was shrouded in a heavy, suffocating silence. Meg could feel it pressing on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Leo sat in the back seat, his small face turned towards the window, but the usual childish spark in his eyes as he watched the world go by was gone. It had been extinguished by Mark's coldness, by the unspoken but palpable rejection. Meg knew, with a certainty that ached in her bones, that Mark would never agree to adopt Leo. He wasn't just unprepared, he was actively resistant. All her efforts, her desperate hopes, had been for nothing. She had brought this wonderful, vulnerable child into her home, only to expose him to more adult indifference. The guilt was a bitter pill. Are you not going to come visit me anymore? Leo asked, his voice so quiet Meg almost missed it. It was a child's voice, laced with a despair that no 6-year-old should ever know. Meg's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. Her heart fractured. Tears pricked at her own eyes, but she fought them back for Leo's sake. Oh, Leo, sweetie, of course I'll visit you, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, to inject a confidence she didn't feel. Always. You can always count on me. I promise. Leo said nothing, just continued to stare out the window. His small shoulders slumped. A part of Meg was breaking, shattering with each mile that drew them closer to the shelter. She knew this was devastating for him, this brief taste of a home, of a mother's affection, only to have it snatched away. What else could she do? She couldn't bring him into a home where he wasn't wanted, where one half of the parental unit was a block of ice. When they pulled up to Open Arms, Leo didn't move to get out. He sat with his arms wrapped around his knees, as if trying to make himself smaller, to disappear. Meg felt a cold dread creep into her soul. She opened her door and walked around to his side, her hand hovering over the handle. We're here, honey, she said softly. Vicky met them at the door, her usual cheerful demeanor instantly clouded by concern, as she took in Meg's strained face and Leo's dejected posture. Oh, Meg, how did it go? She asked, her arm going around Meg's shoulders in a supportive hug. How are you feeling? Meg let out a weary sigh, the fight draining out of her. You wouldn't believe it, Vic. Mark? He barely even spoke to him, acted like Leo was an inconvenience, a problem. Her voice was low, raw with pain. He's not ready, Vic. He doesn't want this. He made that crystal clear. Vicky frowned, clearly shocked. He didn't even try to connect with him? Seriously? I really thought seeing Leo might change his mind. Meg shook her head, a bitter smile twisting her lips. It only made things worse. Leo was so excited when I brought him home. He hoped. I wanted him to stay so badly, Vic. But Mark, Vicky squeezed her shoulder, her eyes filled with empathy. You did everything you could, Meg. You know Mark. He's not exactly Mr. Spontaneous or Mr. Flexible. Just then, Leo, who had slowly trailed behind them, spoke, his voice a mere whisper, but carrying the weight of the world. I don't want to stay here. Meg turned, her heart constricting. He stood a few feet away, his face a mask of stoic misery, his eyes brimming with fear and a profound sense of loss. Leo, she said, her voice thick with emotion as she knelt and pulled him into a hug. He was stiff at first, then clung to her. You know I'll come see you, right? You're not alone. Promise you won't forget me? He whispered against her shoulder, his voice choked with unshed tears. The pain in that small plea was a dagger to Meg's heart. I will never forget you, Leo, she vowed, holding him tighter. You are so important to me. You always will be." He said nothing more, but the despair in his eyes was a silent scream. Meg wanted to scoop him up, to run far away where no one could hurt them, but she knew it was impossible. Vicky stepped forward, her smile gentle. "Come on, Leo. The other kids have been asking about you. They missed their fort-building champion." Her voice was warm, coaxing. Leo nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on Meg, full of a sorrow that tore at her soul. He let Vicky lead him inside. Meg stood on the sidewalk, the weight of the world on her shoulders. As Leo disappeared through the door, she turned to Vicky, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do, Vic. This is destroying me." Vicky pulled her into another hug. "You're not alone in this, Meg. We'll figure something out. You'll see. You're strong." But as Meg walked back to her car, she couldn't shake the image of Leo's heartbroken face, the feeling that she had failed him, abandoned him to a system that, however caring, was not a home. Her heart felt like it had been ripped in two. The workday dragged, each minute an eternity. Meg felt like she was moving through thick molasses, the fatigue a heavy cloak on her shoulders. Every phone call, every patient, every mundane task felt monumental. She yearned for the day to end, yet the thought of returning to her empty, silent condo, now tainted by Mark's recent ultimatum and the ghost of Leo's disappointed face, filled her with a cold dread. Her carefully ordered life was unraveling. The clinic phone rang, startling her. "City Kids Pediatrics, Dr. Miller speaking." "Dr. Miller? Oh, thank goodness. Could you possibly make a house call? My daughter Sophia, she's terribly unwell, and we just don't know what's wrong." The woman's voice on the other end was tight with panic, tinged with an unmistakable upper-crust accent. Meg sighed internally. Another emergency. "Of course," she said, professionalism kicking in despite her emotional exhaustion. "Text me the address. I'll head over as soon as I can." Her own turmoil would have to wait. A child needed her. The address, when it arrived, led her to one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive, high-gated enclaves. The house was a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion, opulent to the point of ostentation. Every manicured shrub, every gleaming window, screamed money and status. Meg rang the bell, and a flustered woman with expensively highlighted hair and a designer tracksuit opened the door. She introduced herself as Larissa Vanderbilt. "Dr. Miller, thank you for coming so quickly," Larissa said, though her tone held a faint note of impatience, as if Meg were tardy. "My Sophia, she's just not herself." Meg nodded, trying to maintain a neutral expression as she stepped into a foyer that looked like a museum exhibit: marble floors, antique tapestries, gilded picture frames. It all felt too perfect, almost sterile. It set her teeth on edge, but she pushed the feeling aside. The child's bedroom was a confection of pink and white, smelling of expensive floral air freshener and, faintly, of a sick child. Sophia, a pale girl of about 7 or 8, lay listlessly in a canopied bed. "Hi, Sophia," Meg said gently. "I'm Dr. Meg. How are you feeling, sweetie?" The girl managed a weak smile. "Tired, doctor. My tummy hurts and my throat feels scratchy." She coughed delicately. Meg conducted her examination, asking questions, checking temperature, listening to her chest. Nothing alarming presented itself. "Everything seems pretty normal, Sophia," she said, making notes. "No major symptoms. It could be a mild bug, or maybe just a bit of stress." Sophia looked at her with wide, trusting eyes. "Why do I get sick so much, doctor?" Meg paused, considering. Her gaze drifted around the room, and then it snagged on something: a silver-framed photograph on the bedside table, a girl, undeniably Sophia, laughing, held securely in the arms of a man with dark familiar hair and a strong, determined jawline. Meg froze. The blood rushed from her head, leaving her lightheaded. It couldn't be. "Sophia," she asked, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. "Who's that man in the picture with you?" Sophia beamed, a genuine, heartfelt smile that transformed her pale face. "That's my daddy," she announced proudly. "He works a lot and goes on trips, but he loves me very, very much." Meg felt the air leave her lungs. "Daddy?" Her vision tunneled. The man in the photo was Mark, her husband. How was this possible? Just then Larissa re-entered the room, her face a mask of anxious concern. "How is she, doctor?" "Your daughter, Sophia, will be fine," Meg managed, her mind reeling, struggling to process the impossible. "Nothing serious. I'll prescribe some vitamins. Perhaps she's just a little run down." Larissa's face flooded with relief. "Oh, thank you, doctor. That's such a weight off my mind." Meg scribbled a prescription, her hand shaking so violently she could barely form the letters. She mumbled her goodbyes and practically fled the mansion. Once in her car, the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. The photograph, Mark, Daddy. "So this is why you're always on a big case, always traveling for work," she whispered, the words laced with a venomous betrayal. Her carefully constructed world wasn't just unraveling, it was imploding. Meg drove away from Larissa Vanderbilt's opulent prison, each mile increasing the storm of confusion and rage inside her. The image of Mark holding Sophia, the little girl's joyful declaration, "That's my daddy," seared into her brain. Her husband, with another woman, another child, a secret life. It was a betrayal so profound, so audacious, it stole her breath. A gnawing, sickening feeling twisted in her gut. This couldn't be real. Her car moved on autopilot through the winding Beverly Hills streets. Then, as she rounded a curve, a familiar vehicle caught her eye. A black SUV. Mark's SUV. It was parked a few blocks from Larissa's mansion, half hidden by an overgrown oleander hedge. Without a second thought, a cold, desperate resolve hardening within her, Meg pulled over, killed her engine, and waited. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct screamed at her to drive away, to pretend she hadn't seen, but a darker, more primal need to know the truth, however devastating, kept her rooted to the spot. She didn't have to wait long. Mark emerged from the direction of Larissa's house, striding confidently, adjusting his tie. He looked different, more relaxed, less burdened than the man who shared her sterile condo. He got into his SUV and pulled away. Meg took a deep breath, her hands trembling, and followed at a discreet distance. He drove, not towards their home, but deeper into the labyrinth of wealth and privilege, finally parking in front of another, even more ostentatious mansion. This one was a modern monolith of glass and steel, a fortress of secrets. Meg parked down the street, her view partially obscured by a palm tree, and watched. Her breath hitched as Mark got out of his car. Just as he reached the massive front door, it swung open. A small figure hurtled out. Sophia. "Daddy! Daddy, you're back! I missed you so much!" Sophia's delighted shriek echoed in the quiet, affluent street. She threw her arms around Mark's neck and he swung her up, his face alight with a tenderness Meg hadn't seen in years, if ever. Then, Larissa Vanderbilt appeared in the doorway. She glided towards Mark, a picture of sophisticated allure in a silk caftan. And then, the final crushing blow. Larissa leaned in and kissed Mark. Not a peck on the cheek, but a lingering, intimate kiss on the lips. Mark kissed her back. Meg felt something inside her snap. The world tilted, colors blurring at the edges. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad dream. This was her reality. Her husband, the man she had loved, trusted, built a life with for 10 years, had another family, a secret wife, a secret daughter. "I hate you," she choked out, slamming her fists against the steering wheel. "How could you? How could you do this to me?" The words were a raw, ragged sound, torn from the depths of her shattered soul. She couldn't bear to watch another second of their sickeningly perfect family tableau. Blinded by tears and a white-hot fury, she slammed the car into drive and sped away, the image of Mark's betrayal burning itself onto her retinas. Back in their condo, their lie, the oppressive silence was a physical weight. She stumbled to the liquor cabinet, her hands shaking as she fumbled for a bottle of wine. She didn't bother with a glass, just twisted off the cap and drank deeply, the cheap red burning a path down her throat, doing nothing to numb the searing pain. "How could you, Mark?" she screamed into the empty room, her voice cracking. "All this time? I believed you, I loved you, and you were living a lie." Her gaze fell on their wedding photo, displayed proudly on a bookshelf. Two smiling faces, blissfully ignorant. With a strangled sob, she snatched it up and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered, scattering like the broken pieces of her life. The shards on the floor mirrored the jagged edges of her heart. She sank to the floor, tears streaming, her body racked with sobs. It was over. Everything was over. With a desperate, almost feral energy, she scrambled to the bedroom, dragged out a suitcase, and began yanking Mark's clothes from the closet, stuffing them haphazardly inside. Each shirt, each pair of pants, was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. This wasn't just packing, it was an exorcism. When the suitcase was full, she dragged it to the front door. Then, her hands still trembling, she dialed Vicky's number. "Vicky," she gasped when her friend answered. "Vicky, what am I going to do?" The words were barely out before a fresh wave of sobs overwhelmed her. "Meg? Meg, what's wrong? What happened?" Vicky's voice was sharp with alarm. "Mark!" Meg choked out, each word a fresh stab of pain. He has another family, Vicky. A wife, a daughter." The confession spoken aloud made the nightmare horrifyingly real. I'm going to be sick." "Stay put, I'm on my way," Vicky said, her voice firm and reassuring. "Don't do anything, I'll be there in 10. Vicky arrived to find the condo door ajar, a large suitcase standing sentinel in the entryway like a grim omen. The air inside was thick with despair and the faint, acrid smell of cheap wine. Meg was huddled on the kitchen floor, her face tear-streaked, a shattered picture frame glinting accusingly nearby. "Oh, Meg, honey," Vicky breathed, rushing to her side, her heart aching for her friend. "What in God's name happened? Tell me everything." Meg looked up, her eyes raw and swollen. "It's worse than I ever imagined, Vic," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Mark, he didn't just cheat on me, he has a whole other life, a whole other family." Vicky helped her to a chair, her mind struggling to reconcile this image of a duplicitous Mark with the stoic, if emotionally distant man she thought she knew. Meg, numbly, poured them both a generous glass of wine, her hand shaking. "Talk to me, Meg." "What other family?" Vicky pressed gently, trying to make sense of the impossible. Meg took a large gulp of wine, her gaze fixed on some distant, horrifying memory. "I was on a house call today, at this ridiculous mansion in Beverly Hills." Her voice trembled. "And there was a photo. Mark holding this little girl, and she called him Daddy." She choked back a sob. "Larissa Vanderbilt, that's her name. His other wife." Vicky stared, aghast. "Are you sure, Meg? You actually saw him? With them?" It was too shocking, too out of character for the Mark she knew, or thought she knew. This was the stuff of lurid daytime talk shows, not her best friend's life. "Yes!" Meg cried, her composure shattering. "I saw them! I followed him, Vic! He went to this other huge house and the little girl Sophia ran out yelling, 'Daddy!' And then Larissa came out and he kissed her. Like they were married." Her voice broke. "How could I have been so blind? How could I not have seen he was lying to me all these years?" Vicky wrapped her arms around Meg, holding her tight as the sobs racked her friend's body. "Shh, it's okay, I'm here," she murmured, stroking her hair. "You're strong, Meg. You'll get through this. I'm with you." "He betrayed me," Meg whispered, her voice muffled against Vicky's shoulder. "He betrayed everything we had." Maybe there's some mistake?" Vicky offered weakly, though even to her own ears it sounded hollow. Meg pulled back, her eyes blazing with a fresh wave of pain and anger. "No mistake, Vic. I saw it. This morning I even told him about Leo, about wanting to adopt. He shut me down, said it was a bad idea, that he couldn't take on someone else's kid." Of course he couldn't. He already had one. The bitter irony was a fresh twist of the knife. "I was so stupid, Vic, so naive thinking we could be a real family." "You're not stupid, Meg. You loved him, you trusted him. It's not your fault he was a liar." Suddenly, the sound of a key in the front door lock cut through the charged atmosphere. Meg stiffened, her eyes flying to the door, a new volatile energy surging through her. Mark. He was home. Her grief momentarily eclipsed by a towering rage, she scrambled to her feet and stalked towards the entryway. Mark walked in, looking tired but otherwise untroubled, until his gaze fell on the packed suitcase. his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's this?" he asked, his voice wary. "You low-life cheating bastard!" Meg shrieked, launching herself at him, pushing him hard in the chest. Tears of fury streamed down her face. "Get out! Get out of my house! I know everything! I know about your other family!" Mark stumbled back, his face a mask of shock and utter bewilderment. He looked from Meg's contorted face to Vicky, who stood pale and silent in the kitchen doorway, then back to the suitcase. "Meg, what are you talking about? Other family?" His voice was strained, his eyes darting around as if searching for an explanation. "Don't play dumb with me, Mark!" Meg exploded, her voice raw. "I saw you! I followed you! I saw you at that mansion with Larissa and Sophia, your wife, your daughter! How long, Mark? How long have you been living this disgusting double life?" Mark stared at her, his mouth slightly agape, seemingly speechless. He looked utterly poleaxed, as if she'd accused him of sprouting wings. "Honey, please," he finally stammered, taking a step towards her, his hands outstretched. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." "Don't you dare touch me!" Meg spat, recoiling as if from a viper. "You don't deserve to explain anything. I hate you. You think I didn't see you kissing her? Cuddling that little girl? While I was here alone, grieving the children we could never have?" Her voice cracked on a sob. "Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce. Now get your damn suitcase and get out!" Her words, laced with venom and unbearable pain, hung in the air. Mark seemed to deflate. The fight, if there ever was any in him, drained away. He looked at her one last time, his face a mixture of shock, hurt, and something unreadable, then slowly bent down, picked up the suitcase, and walked out the door without another word. As the door closed behind him, Meg stumbled back into the kitchen, her legs threatening to give out. Vicky rushed to her side. You didn't even let him say anything," Vicky said quietly, hesitantly. "What was there to hear?" Meg wept, sinking into a chair, the fight gone, leaving only a vast, aching emptiness. "How happy he is with them. How I was just an afterthought?" She looked at Vicky, her eyes filled with a despair so profound it was terrifying. "He never loved me, Vic. He used me." Vicky knelt beside her, taking her hand. "Oh, Meg, I don't know. This just doesn't sound like Mark. Are you absolutely sure there isn't more to it?" Meg pulled her hand away. "You don't understand, Vicky. Sometimes, the people closest to us, they're strangers. I was blind. I thought he was mine, but he was never really mine at all." The tears flowed freely now, a torrent of grief for a love she realized had been a carefully constructed lie. The days that followed Mark's departure were a blur of shadows and silence. Meg moved through her condo like a ghost. The windows shuttered. The only sound, the relentless LA rain drumming a mournful rhythm against the glass. She barely ate, barely slept. The wedding photo, now just a frame with jagged edges, lay on the coffee table, a constant mocking reminder of her shattered illusions. She'd thought she was strong, independent. Now she was just broken. After a week of existing in this self-imposed purgatory, a tiny flicker of her old resolve sparked. This wasn't living. It was a slow, agonizing decay. With a trembling hand, she called a lawyer. "I want to file for divorce," she stated, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. A few days later, desperate for an escape, Meg rented a small secluded cabin in the San Bernardino Mountains. The quiet of the forest, the crisp air, the absence of city noise and prying eyes began to work a subtle magic. Long walks, the crackle of a fire, the simple act of breathing clean air, slowly, painstakingly, she began to piece herself back together. She realized Mark's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had also, in a strange way, liberated her. She no longer had to live up to the charade of a perfect marriage. Returning to LA and her pediatric clinic felt like stepping back into a life that no longer fit. Work, once her solace, now felt like another obligation, but she soldiered on. One evening, feeling particularly adrift, she stopped by the little cafe near her clinic. She chose a quiet table by the window, nursing a latte, her mind replaying the painful events of the past few weeks. "Meg, is that you?" A familiar voice startled her. "Tony, a mutual friend of hers and Mark's, a fellow detective. He slid into the chair opposite her, his usually cheerful face etched with concern. Wow, long time no see. You okay? Well, you don't look okay. Meg managed a weak smile. It's been rough, Tony, really rough. Yeah, Mark's been a wreck too, Tony said, then seemed to catch himself. Look, it's none of my business, but what the hell happened between you two? He's clammed up tighter than a clam. The dam of Meg's composure finally broke. He cheated on me, Tony, she whispered, the shame and pain still fresh. He had another family. Tony leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Another… Meg, are you sure? You knew Mark was undercover, right? On that Vanderbilt case? Meg stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding. Undercover? What Vanderbilt case? What are you talking about? Tony's jaw dropped. Oh my God, he breathed, running a hand through his hair. He didn't tell you? Meg, Larissa Vanderbilt. She wasn't his wife. She was the target of a major sting operation. Racketeering, money laundering, the works. Mark had to get close to her, gain her trust. He was playing a role, Meg, a dangerous one. Meg felt the world tilt on its axis again, but this time in a completely different direction. The little girl? Sophia? She choked out. Larissa's daughter, Tony confirmed. Not Mark's. He became a father figure to her because it was part of the cover, essential to get to Larissa. He couldn't tell you, Meg. It was too risky. For you, for him, for the case. They just wrapped it up. Larissa's in federal custody. Sophia's with her biological father now. He'd been kept away by Larissa for years. The cafe, the city, everything faded. Mark hadn't betrayed her. He'd been protecting her, protecting others. The shame that washed over Meg was immense. She had accused him, condemned him, thrown him out, all without letting him utter a single word of explanation. Tony, thank you, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes, tears of relief, of regret, of dawning understanding. Thank you for telling me. She grabbed her purse and fled the cafe, her mind reeling. On the street, her hands shaking, she dialed Mark's number. His voice, when he answered, was flat, devoid of emotion. Sullivan. Mark, she sobbed into the phone. Mark, it's Meg. Oh God, I am so sorry. Tony just told me everything, the undercover op, Larissa, Sophia, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you make me listen? A long pause. Then Mark's voice, softer now, laced with a weary sadness. You weren't exactly in a listening mood, Meg, and I couldn't risk it. Not then. Come home, Mark, she pleaded, her voice thick with unshed tears. Please come home. I'll make dinner. We need to talk. I need to make this right. I'd like that, Meg, he said, and she could hear the faintest hint of hope in his voice. I'd like that very much. When Mark walked through the door later that evening, the condo was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken and a fragile, tentative peace. He looked tired, older, but his eyes, when they met hers, held a flicker of the love she thought she'd lost forever. She flew into his arms, and their kiss was a desperate healing balm on wounds that had run far too deep. As they held each other, they both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but their love, tested by fire and secrets, had a chance to be rebuilt, stronger and more honest than before. And somewhere, in the back of Meg's mind, a small, hopeful thought began to form. Maybe, just maybe, their future still had room for a little boy with haunted blue eyes.